Hey, welcome into The Zone. I'm Johnny Congdon, filling in for Jeff Spiegel. Guys, last night, LeBron James threw an all-time temper tantrum after he went to the rim in the final seconds in a game against the Celtics. Didn't get a foul called, so that begs the question, when was the last time you got this angry at work?
Sixth grade white basketball, and he stole my temper tantrum.
Just the other day, lunch was 15 minutes late. You do not do that to me.
And just for the record, not a foul. That was all ball. You're in The Zone.
From the ABC 3340 sports team, this is The Zone.
Oklahoma came ready to play, and we obviously didn't. They told our guys coming in they had a bunch of one-possession losses. They're much better than their record indicated. They were ready to go. I didn't think we were. You know, they jumped on us from the beginning. We never really got back in it.
Yeah, from the word go Saturday, you just felt this one wasn't going the Tide's way. Oklahoma threw the first punch, jumping out to a quick 13-6 lead. And from then on out, well, they shot just under 70% from three, and Alabama had no answer for Grant Sherfield, who went on for 30 in the afternoon. So my first question is, where was that Alabama defense? We've heard all year, Oates has said if you don't guard, you're not going to play it. I don't feel like anybody showed up to play defense for Alabama Saturday in Norman.
And the irony is Mari Burnett was back in a limited role, and that's the guy that was kind of the key to it. So maybe it was they just weren't matching up chemistry-wise because of the new substitutions. But we've seen this coming. I mean, they've been so good for so long, I think it gets to their heads.
So when Burnett left, their next two games were against Memphis and Gonzaga, and Memphis put, 88 on them, I think it was. Gonzaga shot like 150% from beyond the arc in the second half. And that was their two worst defensive games, but it seemed like they had fixed all of that. It cracked a little bit against Mississippi State at home the other night, and the dam broke at Oklahoma. And if you're Nate Oates, you hope that's what you needed to get your team's attention.
Yeah, absolutely. We know that Nate Oates likes to coach that fast, up-tempo style of basketball, and Alabama's typically pretty good from three, but the last two games, not the case. Against Mississippi State, they only hit 5 threes. Yesterday, they were in single digits yet again. They were averaging just over 11 threes a game coming into this. So where's the Alabama long ball gone?
I think they're in a little slump. That doesn't bother me. What bothers me, though, is the teams with big guys who bully you have been bullying them and kind of stopping them from going to the rim. We see it against Mississippi State. We saw it in earlier losses, and we saw it yesterday. So they couldn't get in flow because if they're not hitting the three ball, I mean, they beat Houston without hitting the three ball. They can win without hitting the three ball, but these teams are taking away the other offense.
Yeah, and I mean, like, Clowney is indicative of everything. He's over his last 20 from beyond the arc. Sure. It's just a team that is in a funk shooting the basketball. And again, if you're Nate Oates, you're thrilled that funk is coming in the middle of the end of January and not sometime in March. You hope it is the only time you get in this type of rut shooting the ball. But to Doug's point, you've got to find that secondary game. If the outside shot isn't working, how can you counteract that with something on the inside?
Now, it's certainly not time to hit the panic button, not quite yet, but this week certainly wasn't what Alabama fans had in mind after being ranked the #2 team in the nation. But according to Ty guard Rylan Griffin, well, he along with his teammates, well, they kind of sensed this slip coming. Take a listen.
You know, there was a point where you could kind of feel that we thought we were kind of untouchable, but today we came out lost, and Coach Oates has been warning us about something like this happening, so now that we see that, then we need to come back out with an edge on our shoulder and start the games off better.
Now, do you think this Bama team was maybe reading their own press clippings a little too much, feeling their oats? Do you think that #2 ranking kind of went to their head?
Yeah, and the fact that the schedule, you know, now the schedule flattens out after being so difficult to start the year, and I think mentally it's a bigger chore. I mean, look at Oklahoma. Oh my God, they're 2-6 in the Big 12. Oh, we got them. You know, and this, I think it's going to be a problem this week with the games ahead.
But even Alabama was embracing it. I mean, they took the Charles Barkley quote from my favorite daily show, The Next Round, nextroundlive.com, and where Charles said that Alabama was the best team in the country. And even as Charles said, as an Auburn guy, it pains me to say that, but Alabama's the best team in the country. Alabama played that on their Jumbotron.
Their hype video.
On their hype video before the Mississippi State game. So even Alabama was embracing that a lot of people thought they were the best team in the country. They didn't seem to handle that too well. Again, poorly as they played against Mississippi State, they played even poorer at Oklahoma.
Let's check in on the Auburn Tigers now, who after keeping it together for much of the first month of the season, 2 months of the season, well, they're starting to feel some of the cracks in the foundation, not playing their best basketball, no, not by any means. Earlier this week, Bruce Pearl's bunch had their home win streak snapped when Texas A&M came into Neville Arena and physically dominated the Tigers for much of the evening. And then Saturday, Auburn travels to West Virginia, and they fall to a Mountaineer team who, despite a brutal schedule, haven't had many quality wins on the year. So that begs the question, what is the biggest problem with this Auburn Tiger basketball team right now?
I think Bruce scheduled more for record than getting them ready. And listen, you can understand that to a degree, but they're not as good as their metrics say they were, and I think it's catching up to them. And now that worries me because now they're really ready to face a gauntlet, and they haven't shown they're up to it. You need to play these games in November, not start stockpiling them in January and February.
And I think they have got average guard play. Sure. And Wendell Green is a small guard. When they run up against big guards that can play physical, they can trap a line. That's trouble for Wendell Green. He didn't get any help out of Flanagan against Texas A&M. Flanagan had a really bad game, so their guard play was tough, and you just don't have the Kessler and Smith bailout plan that you had last year. Broome is a nice player, but he's not Jabari Smith. You don't have a Kessler. They erased a lot of deficiencies for Auburn last year. You just don't have that this year.
So West Virginia's Eric Stevenson, he looked like Larry Bird Saturday. He went for 31. Auburn couldn't do anything to contain them. You mentioned Jabari Smith and Walker Kessler. We think about what they've done offensively, but again, Kessler, reigning Defensive Player of the Year when he was last year at Auburn. And then, of course, Jabari Smith, underrated as a defensive stopper. Do you feel like the Auburn defensive identity kind of went out the window when both those players went to the NBA?
Well, yeah, because you could get away with a lot because you had Kessler protecting the rim, and Jabari Smith could do so much inside out. So, yeah, I think that's been hard to make up personnel-wise.
But on top of that, Doug, is Auburn is such a poor outside shooting team that they don't have any margin for error.
Sure.
You know, if they were a little better outside shooting team, you could erase some of the defensive deficiencies that you lost with a Walker Kessler. But they don't shoot very well from outside. So there's just really no margin for error for this Auburn team. They've just got to be on point. And as Doug said, this remaining schedule is brutal. Ken Palm says it's the fourth most difficult remaining strength of schedule in the country.
15 seconds quickly. Is this Auburn team going to make the NCAA tournament?
Yes, but it's going to be close.
Yeah, they are, but I think they're going to be an 8-9 type team.
Now, Alabama and Auburn, they weren't the only two SEC programs that struggled Saturday. No, in the final year of the SEC Big 12 Challenge, it was the Big 12 that went out with a bang. With the conference going 7-3, Kansas took to the road and beat Coach Calipari and the Kentucky Wildcats at Rupp. Baylor took the trip to Fayetteville, and they went on to beat the Razorbacks 67-64. And Kansas State, who no one saw as a legit threat this year, I should say, whooped up on Florida bad, 64-50. So I asked the two of you, is the SEC down this year, or is the Big 12 just that good?
SEC's pretty good, and I still think there are two Final Four possibilities here. The problem is the Big 12 is just better than anybody. I mean, you compare them to the ACC, the Big East, the Big 10, they're just better, 1 through 9. Any one of those 1 through 9 are good enough to compete in the SEC, even win the SEC.
Yeah, at one point, I think 9 of those 10 were ranked to the top 40 in Ken Palm, which is crazy. They had almost a quarter of the top 40. Texas Tech's no good. Although they did beat LSU, they are no good. Other than that, I mean, legitimately, any team could win their conference tournament. Any of those other 9. That is a deep, deep conference.
Yeah.
Now, as we look at some of the upper echelon in both these conferences, the big boys from the top, who are you riding with? If you have to put the SEC against the Big 12. You go in the SEC with the Alabamas, the Tennessees, the Auburns. Even let's throw A&M in there instead of Kentucky. I think they're more deserving to be on that upper echelon. Or the Big 12 with names like Kansas, Kansas State, Baylor, Texas. TCU is having a really good season. Who are you taking between those two conferences?
I'm still riding, though, with Alabama and Tennessee, particularly what you've seen. Tennessee has owned the Big 12. They beat Kansas, they beat Texas, you know, and they play defense, and they have good enough guard play in the tournament. So, really, I'm riding with Tennessee.
I think I would go with the depth of the Big 12. And you mentioned TCU, and rightfully so, though they did lose in overtime at State in the SEC Big 12 Challenge. That was one of the SEC upsets. But TCU is good. I just think the depth of the Big 12. If you ask me Big 12 versus SEC, I'd take the Big 12.
Let's talk some football now, where earlier this week, news became official that Bill O'Brien will indeed be leaving the college ranks to return to the NFL to become the offensive coordinator of the New England Patriots. Now, taking a quick snapshot from his 2 years at Alabama, the Tide went 24-4. Bryce Young won the Heisman Trophy in 2021, and Alabama's offense, well, they averaged 477 yards per game and just over 41 points per contest, that being in 2022. So, I got to ask the question, why did Alabama fans hate this guy so much? You look at those numbers. I mean, if you told me that 5 years ago, every single Alabama fan would sign up for that. Why did this fan base never embrace Bill O'Brien?
Because he didn't win a national title. Simple as that. You know, they were good, but they weren't explosive good. And the reasons, the talent has nothing to do with Bill O'Brien. I thought he did a fantastic job, and I think Alabama fans realized. Remember, they didn't think much of Brian Dable either at the time.
I think with the Alabama offensive coordinator, it's not what you do in 10 games. There's like 2 games every regular season where your head's in the vice, right? And this year it was Tennessee and LSU, and they dug such a deep hole. Tennessee was up 21-7 after 1. They dug such a deep hole with a slow start offensively. They had to climb out of it the rest of the game. And at LSU, they were just bad. And those are the 2 games he's going to be judged on. You don't get judged on what you do against State and what you do against Kentucky and what you do against Western Carolina. You put big numbers up. It's those 2 times, and he came up short in both those situations.
And that first game where I think fans started to lose trust in him was down at Kyle Field in 2021.
No doubt.
Some poor play calling in that, and that spirals in this fan base. Hey, let's ask the million-dollar question. Who's going to be the next offensive coordinator at Alabama?
I honestly don't know. I still think Jeff Lebby's in the mix. Because it's taking so long, I wonder if Brian Johnson could be in the mix.
Yeah, I think Lebby is probably the first choice for Nick Saban. I'll give you a name to watch. I think it's probably too early for him. But watch the name A.J. Milwee. He was an analyst with Alabama. I think it's too early this time. He's with Sark out of Texas. He's a state guy. Nick Saban really liked him. I think down the road, this guy's got a bright future.
And coming up next, Jalen Hurts is going to the Super Bowl. Stetson Bennett had a little too much fun in the Lone Star State. That and more coming up in sports.
It's been a lot. It's been a lot. You know, I'm not going to make this about me, man. This city, this is a special city. They deserve everything that's going on.
Jalen Hurts will become the first Alabama quarterback to start in the Super Bowl since Kenny Stabler led the Raiders to Super Bowl 11. Now, this game was crazy considering San Francisco quite literally ran out of quarterbacks. They had nobody left. Nonetheless, Hurts and his Eagles make enough plays to win the NFC title game with ease. They beat the Niners 31-7 the final. Now, we're taping this during the AFC Championship game, so we don't know who Philly will play. But, guys, I know I speak for a large part of the Alabama population that watched Jalen Hurts play. I don't think most people saw him being a starting quarterback when he left college in the NFL. I don't think anybody had him being a starting quarterback leading his team to the Super Bowl in the NFL. How the heck did he get here?
Well, he got messed up with a coach who gets him, and so much of what he does is pre-snap reads, and he's just doing a phenomenal job. But he was actually really good last year. Didn't they go to the playoffs last year? Did he make the Pro Bowl? Wasn't he voted captain? Now they've elevated the teams better.
But he's playing MVP level football, and I never saw that out of Jalen Hurts. It started his final year in Tuscaloosa. Dan Enos got a lot of credit for his coaching of Jalen Hurts. Then he played for Lincoln Riley. We know Lincoln Riley knows about quarterbacks. And Nick Sirianni's gotten the best out of Jalen Hurts. It helps when you're behind that offensive line, who are road graders, and they take care of him. And it helps when you're throwing to A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. How about that catch by Smith? Whew. The catch by Smith earlier today.
It's going to be the only play that people remember from this game. But quickly, I know Speaks asked you last week the most iconic Jalen moment from his time at Alabama. I want to ask you, how do you think he's most improved since the final snap he took at Alabama compared to the quarterback we see today getting ready to play in the Super Bowl?
Quick decisions.
Yeah, I think he's more comfortable in the pocket. It's no longer that roll right, throw it out of bounds, or hit one receiver.
Now, earlier this morning, we woke up to the news that former Georgia quarterback Stetson Bennett had been arrested in Dallas, charged with public intoxication. Now, Bennett is coming off back-to-back national championships with the Georgia Bulldogs. Kind of a storybook few seasons for Bennett, who went from a JUCO player to a walk-on to a 2-time national champion. But with his draft profile, maybe not up to the standard of an NFL quarterback, doesn't necessarily fit the mold. I know he's heard that before. How much did this morning's news affect his draft prospects?
I don't think it affects him just because he's not a guy you're going to risk everything on. He's the guy you're going to take, if you take, later on and just roll the dice that he's the next Brock Purdy.
And I think every NFL scout has studied this guy and knows he's had an IV of Pappy Van Winkle ever since the end of that national championship game. And these charges probably end up getting dropped. So I think this is a blip on the radar for Stetson Bennett.
Yeah, it didn't really affect Eli Manning in 2000. No. He got the same charge, and of course he'd go on to have a great career at Ole Miss and be the #1 overall pick to the Giants. So I want to ask you, does Bennett get drafted? Because I've seen this skewed from so many different people. I have people saying he's going as high as the 3rd round, and some people saying, I don't even know if he'll make an NFL roster. Go find an address in Canada. So do you think he is drafted? And if so, do you think he could be eventually a starter in the National Football League?
I think he gets drafted. I think it's late. And I think, he could be a starter. I mean, He's much better than Brock Purdy was. He's better up to this point than Jalen Hurts was as a sophomore.
But I think like Brock Purdy, he will get drafted, but like Brock Purdy will be a starter by injury only. I don't think he's a guy that goes in and earns a starting job in an NFL franchise. But listen, one of the best jobs in America is backup quarterback in the NFL. Do it long enough, you make a fortune.
And if you do it today, you could have started for the San Francisco 49ers and a chance to go to the Super Bowl. Coming up next, we play college hoops pick-em. Some of the big ones this week in both the SEC and the Big 12. We'll break it all down after the break. Let's play a little pick-em and start in the Big 12 country, where Saturday the Iowa State Cyclones will have their hands full with the Kansas Jayhawks, fresh off a 77-68 victory on the road at Rupp against Kentucky. They'll be back at Allen Fieldhouse Saturday. Cyclones or Jayhawks? Who do you got?
Iowa State's underrated. Kansas is better.
Yeah, I'm going to take Kansas at Fog Island. Though they haven't defended that court that well this year, I still think they get the win.
Let's stay in the Big 12 and preview another massive matchup Saturday. Texas, who is still playing pretty good basketball since head coach Chris Beard was fired, will head on the road to the Little Apple, Manhattan, Kansas, to take on K-State and the surprise Wildcats. I think this sneaky might be the best game of the week. Fellas, Longhorns or Wildcats? Who do you got?
I think Kansas State's a better team, and at home.
Octagon of Doom, that's where they play. I love the nickname of that facility, so give me in the Little Apple K-State.
First time we're talking about them since the Michael Beasley days. Hey, a little closer to home now, where Alabama will look to shake off the loss in Oklahoma and head back on the road this week, taking it on an LSU team who they beat by 46 last time these two teams tangled in mid-January inside Coleman Coliseum. So, simple question we asked during football season, let's do it during hoops. Tide or Tigers? Who do you got?
Tied, but only by 20 this time.
Yeah, I mean, they won't win by 45 again, but this is a pretty good litmus test of, you know, how much they're bouncing back based on what they did to them in Tuscaloosa. Alabama wins comfortably, but not by 45.
And finally, by far the biggest game in the SEC this week will be Bruce Pearl's Auburn Tigers, who hit the road after dropping 2 straight and travel to Rocky Top to take on Rick Barnes and his Tennessee Volunteers, who play that big, bad, physical style of basketball and may just be top dogs in the conference. So I ask you, Auburn or Tennessee?
I think Tennessee's just too strong at home by a dozen.
Pearl has been really good against Tennessee, though, and that's the thing that gives me pause here, but I just don't know that he's got the horses in this one. Give me Tennessee.
And coming up on the bottom line, Doug on the best conference in college basketball, Ryan on the Bengals saving the NFL from themselves, and me on a quarterback who I owe a big apology to. It's time for the bottom line, brought to you by Moe's, and we start as always with Doug.
The Big 12's dominance across the board Saturday proved what we already knew. Big 12 is college basketball's best league this year by a long shot. We also learned much more. Alabama remains vulnerable against physical, defensive-minded teams. Auburn's schedule to date hasn't prepared the Tigers for the gauntlet to come, and Tennessee's defensive toughness is legit. Just ask Texas and Kansas. With a month ago, the SEC's best teams must get better to make March memorable.
We as a nation owe a debt of gratitude to the Cincinnati Bengals, not just for knocking the Buffalo Bills out of the playoffs, but thank you, but maybe for saving us from an awful NFL experiment. Had today's AFC Championship game been Kansas City-Buffalo, it would not have been in Kansas City. It would have been in Atlanta, in what might have been a test flight for moving conference championship games from raucous home stadiums to the controlled environments of neutral sites. It is a mistake the college football playoffs should reconsider before even starting, and would have been a mistake in the NFL as well. Pure and simple, home field crowds make the games better for TV. So thank you, Cincinnati, for doing the Lord's work to stop the NFL and the Bills.
When Jalen Hurts was benched for Tua Tagovailoa at the halftime of the 2018 national title game, I was elated. I was tired of watching Hurts' inability as a passer, and to say that he wasn't my cup of tea as a quarterback, that would be an understatement. But what I never accounted for underneath that skill set was just how big his heart was. He never quit. He never sulked. He just kept working. He improved as a passer. He improved as a runner. He proved that leadership is still very much matters inside an NFL locker room. And now, well, he's just about 60 minutes away from hoisting a Lombardi trophy. I was dead wrong. Jalen Hurts, I'm sorry. That's our show for this week. Thanks for watching. Speaks will be back next Sunday night. And as always, thank you, Doug. Thank you, Ryan. That's The Zone.